For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sashnee Moodley. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Every week there seems to be a new crisis in South Africa, but we drift on. A lot of people speak of the situation now being the end game. What do you think?
Yes, well, this last week has been very dramatic. Last 10 days with the charging of the finance minister with fraud and theft, and the continued student unrest, lots of people arrested, lots of buildings destroyed, lots of police firing of weaponry and so forth. And a lot of commentators are saying, well, this is nearing the end of the Zuma era. Even a very sober commentator like Carol Payton yesterday wrote saying that they may work for an exit package for Zuma because it's very difficult for the ANC NEC to remove him, because most of the people on the NEC are people who support Zuma, who come from the so-called Premier League and things like that. And what she says really is that Cyril Ramaphosa has been ineffectual. He's not really made much impression in the 4 years that he's been there. On the other hand, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma doesn't command a consensus. Neither Dlamini Zuma or Ramaphosa can command a consensus if Zuma were to exit. And the reason that Carol Payton gives why Ramaphosa won't make it is that he has been ineffectual. He doesn't make an impression. But I think the reason is exactly the opposite, in that what they want to be sure about, the people who support Zuma and Zuma himself, is that when he leaves office, the charges of corruption will not be brought, and that whatever ill-gotten wealth he's got and others have got will be secure. And they feel they can't rely on Ramaphosa for that. That's my view. So it's really the opposite, in the sense that they may attribute to Ramaphosa not ineffectuality, but a sort of degree, or that he may actually recover a certain amount of energy and backbone to do this. But on the other hand, from Zuma's point of view, to step aside means that you don't have direct control on what's going on. And he may try and fight to the end. And for us as a country, it's creating havoc. Not that I can say who must take his place, things like that, but it's creating massive havoc. And the way in which the people who are acting in support of Zuma have been conducting their jobs is also creating levels of dysfunctionality and irregularity in state institutions. For example, the NPA prosecution of Gordhan Pillay and Magashula seems to indicate that they've brought a case where it's not possible to secure a conviction. From the legal analyses that I've read, it seems that the chances are so slim that it may possibly be that Sean Abrams can be charged with malicious prosecution. Now, there was someone on the radio from the NPA saying, well, you know, he didn't take the decision taken by the local director and this and that. That doesn't matter. The person who actually announced it, signed it off and all of that is Sean Abrams. So he bears responsibility for this, and it may rebound already we have seen that the response of the lawyers of President Gordon has been aggressive. And two constitutional court judges, former constitutional court judges, Krichler and Yacoub, have both said that there doesn't seem to be any basis. A number of other legal experts have said so. We've got dysfunctionality in a number of other institutions, which appears to be unraveling. SARS, for example, there's been this attempt to railroad people who were appointed in the Gordon era, some 50 or 60 people, to get them out of SARS and railroad them into a court case over an alleged rogue unit. Now, first of all, there appears to be no case there as well. But in the meantime, we find that the head of SARS, Moyane's nephew, gets a tender for 220 million or something like that from SARS. Secondly, the number 2 person in SARS, Makwakwa, has figure pick up that 1.2 million in cash payments have been given to him and his mistress, or the mother of his children, and it's unaccounted for. And it appears that Moyane knew about this about 5-6 months ago, never reported it, treated it as if it was an internal affair. Now, you can't treat a criminal matter or potential criminal matter as something that you settled yourself. If someone in Trima does something, rapes someone here, you can't settle that at the level of the Creamer family. You actually have to settle that with the courts. And there were particular procedures that were required, and these are unraveling. There's an unraveling of a lot of institutions. There's a lot of parliamentarians and leaders of the ANC who are unhappy, but they are paralyzed. They don't really know what to do, and it's having an impact on business confidence, on citizens' confidence in democracy, and a lot of these things.
You continually refer to the need to build a united front in order to rebuild South African democracy. Is it an idea whose time has come?
You see, when I have been calling for a united front, I've not myself had the capacity to set something like that into motion, but it is an idea which has been taken up by NUMSA, for example. But the way NUMSA took it up and the united front that they established or initiated has more or less collapsed. And one of the reasons I think it's collapsed is that it was not a broad united front. It was extreme left-wing type of orientation. So the entry point was that you had to believe in Marx and things like that. Whereas the idea of a united front, in my view, should really be limited in the ideological demands it makes on those who join it. For example, I would like to see business come into a united front because they share an interest with the poorest of the poor in having clean government. Because the people who don't get their social grants or their pensions or their disability grants are suffering from the same corruption as business does, albeit with a higher level of security through payments under the table. So I think that would be a good idea. But I think since I started to advance that idea, a new factor has arisen. Whenever I wrote about the problems in the ANC and with Zuma, some people used to write, well, why don't we just vote them out? And I used to get very irritated with this because I never saw it as possible to vote out the ANC and for any other party to get a majority. And what the local government elections have shown is that the ANC is vulnerable, that in 3 major metros in this country, which control huge amounts of the budget of the country, ANC has not been able to get 50% on its own. So the possibility exists for the ANC to fall below 50% in elections in 2019, although even the DA itself does not think it will get 50% on its own. So we have a changed situation. I wouldn't applaud this myself. Some people say, oh, well, competition is very good and that having a dominant party makes them complacent. Once you can be voted out, you're less likely to be corrupt. These are cliches. But of course, what worries me is that the DA is not so sympathetic to the poor. Whatever the ANC may have done, it has spent a large part of its budget on social grants and on welfare measures for the poor. And the DA, its overall ethos is much more towards what they call meritocracy, people getting things on merit. Now, a lot of people don't get things on merit because they come from homes where they don't have electricity to study, where they can't plug in a computer and this, that and the other. They can't afford a computer. So I think we've got to be aware of the fact that it's not an unqualified blessing if the ANC is defeated. Also, it depends, however, on who the DA makes an alliance with in order to get over 50%, whether it's with a party that will lead it to be more pro-poor than otherwise. But it doesn't mean that the ANC can't have a second coming. That's what they used to call, they referred to Obasanjo of Nigeria when he became president for the second time, called it his second coming. Now the ANC could come back, but how will it come back? Will it come back like the Indian Congress in India, decadent, even more corrupt than before? Or will it be reinvigorated, regenerated, etc.? We don't know. My feeling is that if the ANC is voted out of power, it could well collapse, and that we need to be thinking beyond the ANC. We need to be thinking beyond the ANC anyway, whether or not we say the ANC has a part in South Africa's future. That doesn't mean that we put all our eggs in that basket.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about multiple crises moving to end.